Hello, all, and welcome. We are back talking about innovations in competency mapped corporate training. In our last episode, we focused on needs assessments and learning strategies as being foundational to developing competency map models. Moving in this episode, we continue the conversation on scaling and how innovative platforms are helping in the K 12, higher ed, and corporate sectors. Today, once again, we have two guests: Dr. Guido Minaya, CEO and Chief Learning Officer of Minaya Learning Global Solutions, as well as Angelo Biasi, CEO and founder of Massive U. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello, Dr. Minaya, Mr. Biasi. I think we're going to have an enlightening conversation today. I'm excited for our listeners as well as myself. Dr. Minaya, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dario. It's great to be back on, and I'm so delighted Angelo is with us today. Hello, Angelo.
Hello, Guido. Hi, Dario. Nice to be on here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, we're delighted you're here, Angelo. You know, we're continuing our conversation on innovations that help scale skill development through competency map models. And I know you've dedicated part of your career in this arena and have had such success. This is an exciting time as these types of transformative solutions are emerging. What led you to start Massive U, and what problems were you seeing when you started it that you were solving for?
Yeah, thanks, Guido. It started back in when I was teaching at NYU. Always kind of interested in creating new ways to teach and learn. Not a huge fan of direct instruction. I was teaching a course on mobile marketing at NYU, and since it was a course about mobile, I started creating apps on including my content. I had students from all over the world: Italy, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, and some of them learning, my course material in a synchronous capacity in the middle of the night. I had this one woman, Adele from Rome, who was taking my course from 12 to 3 in the morning on Mondays. And so I started creating content on mobile phones, and I created the first course taught online and over mobile phones for NYU, which inevitably led to NYU wanting my course to be their first MOOC, their first massive open online course. I was extremely flattered. This was about 2012 when the democratization of education and training was happening with massive open online courses. I said I'd be happy to do it, but I'm going to build my own platform. And they said, great. Massive U was born. NYU is my first client. And subsequently thereafter, we received a project from the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, NIFTY, who gave us their textbook and said, can you create a project-based social learning game that teaches our curricula of entrepreneurship, a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And so we created a project called a platform called Make Your Job. And several others followed, the World Series of Innovation and several others. And we quickly realized that we had a platform to take traditional curricula and transform that into engaging project-based social learning experiences that students would engage with. They were gamified, there was a social component, and it was a new way to teach and learn that was unlike anything I had seen on the market. And from there, we started working with some large companies like Pearson, McGraw-Hill, Blackboard, Scholastic, K12.com, and several others. And in about 2020, had the idea to take it one step further into a scalable solution as problem-based learning was really hitting the stage. And so we invented the award-winning Solvably, which is a platform that's a collaborative creative problem solving for lifelong learners. So essentially taking the design thinking process, mirroring that with Google Docs on steroids to some extent. And this whole notion of constructivism found in escape rooms, and you'll probably hear me talk a lot about that today, of experiences, everything about learning. It's one thing to receive didactic, direct instruction. It's another thing to apply that learning in an experience that drives behavioral change. And it wasn't until we released Solvably Talent that we really started to get a lot of interest in the platform. And the whole vision was really from K through career. How can we connect the dots of education to workforce such that that there's this continuum of learning based around problem-based learning. So that's a little long-winded answer of how things started, how it evolved, and now to this day, serving hundreds of thousands of learners globally with platforms that really take that experiential applied learning. I like to say, active learning and authentic assessment is where we really get the most amount of behavioral change among learners. Where, if we think of Bloom's taxonomy and getting up to the top of that pyramid, how are they going to have a deeper learning experience where the recall is going to be that much higher versus rote direct instruction that in a lot of cases that recall really drops off quite a bit the more that time goes on.
My goodness, what an incredible journey. Now we're seeing more platforms emerge, and this not becoming the exception, but becoming an identified need. So when you spoke of the connecting the dots, right, we definitely need to make more concrete connections to college and the workforce. So how has project and problem-based social learning innovations that you created and that you've seen connected the dots better between education and workforce? And beyond career exploration, what are you doing to help drive this kind of applied learning and authentic assessment solutions that lead to college and career readiness?
I mentioned earlier behavioral change. We've done a lot of research around, well, what exactly is that? Going from learning to doing to being. And I've always been just so fascinated that there's such a continuum between K-12 and workforce. A stat I recently heard from PwC, which really startled me. Nearly 40% of CEOs don't believe their organizations will be economically viable in 10 years if they do not transform. And it just led me to believe that we have such a responsibility at a young age to educate and train learners on how to become more productive in the future workforce. What is the real usually the real goal of learning is college and career preparedness. Well, how do we connect the dots along that continuum has been a real challenge of mine, and something that a problem that I've really wanted to solve for and have had a vision for quite a long time. But what lens do we see that through? On one hand, you've got K-12 decision makers. On the other hand, you've got workforce. And even when they're in the same room, even though they know they need to talk to each other, they hardly ever have that bridge that satisfies that. And I'm proud to say that with collaborative creative problem-based learning via Solvably, we had third graders on the same platform as business executives. So the ability to look at everything through the lens of a problem, of a challenge, and then work on that as a team to solve for that particular challenge, which, you know, g- go figure, when you get into the workforce, guess what? You're going to be working on a problem. You're going to be having to communicate and collaborate effectively in a team. You're going to have to think critically and be creative. All of those skills are necessary, but through an experience, and that's something that unfortunately we just don't get with direct instruction. It's when we're faced with a challenge, we're working on it in a team, that recall really goes up. So the opportunity to really connect those dots, that continuum, lifelong learning. We often say Solvably is the first collaborative creative problem solving platform for lifelong learners. And to think that, as we build our series of challenges from K through career and all the way back, starting with the employer and working backwards, and starting with the learner and working forwards, well, what happens in that middle? If we can track that progress and development, that longitudinal efficacy over time, I think we have the greatest opportunity to create a more qualified, better prepared talent pool for the future workforce.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that, Angelo. With the innovative platforms which are helping communities shorten the cycle of identifying, training, qualifying, and giving them access to prospective candidates in key job areas, how do you envision skills based recruitment, upskilling, reskilling? What's that going to look like in the future? And what have you found in the marketplace that is gaining traction to accelerate an extreme need, which is matching candidates with the significant number of positions that we have open presently?
Yeah, that's a great question, Guido. And I got my first taste of that in about 2005 when I was working for a company called NBSA, and we had a really unique, way ahead of its time platform that you would come in as a customer service rep. You would take an online assessment. It would identify your skill gaps and weaknesses and would serve up the training over the next 8 to 16 weeks, where you would earn your job readiness training certification to become a customer service rep. This is a position I'm interested. This is a role I'm interested in. It would take you from soup to nuts online, right through a skill certification. And the coolest part about it was that upon completion, that user got to select from one of 8 universities that they could put that logo on their job readiness training certification. Anyways, it was a program that was way ahead of its time. Very, very, now that as we look at alternative pathways to employability, this was certainly one of them. Like I say, it was way ahead of its time. This was before boot camps, before learn to earn, before several of those alternative pathways. Yet we couldn't find a home for it. We went to Walmart thinking that we could get people off of their compensation roles and back into the workforce. We went to Social Security Administration, veterans, people with disabilities. And then one of the worst and best things happened. Hurricane Katrina hit the area of New Orleans. And there were so many folks that were displaced through that experience. And I started working with the Salvation Army on a program, a job readiness training program, where I would go into these communities in Houston, where a lot of the folks were displaced to, as one example. With a couple of laptops and a few air cards, and get them their job readiness training certification. And what I learned was, New Orleans, a lot of hospitality jobs. Houston, not a lot of hospitality jobs. However, a lot of customer service. We had Continental Airlines, Lockheed Martin, other employers like that. And really starting with the job openings and working backwards to help that group, which over 5 years, we retrained and reemployed over 15,000 displaced hurricane survivors to reassimilate into the workforce based on the job openings within that location. Now, fast forward to today, as you mentioned, Guido, it's skills first recruiting strategy, competency based learning. We're hearing a lot of those buzzwords. And what are some of the platforms that I'm seeing out there that are really, really cool and shorten that cycle, from job openings to qualifying and training candidates to fill those positions? One company that's doing some really great work is called Skillfully out of Silicon Valley. They're using simulation based AI to similar to how we were doing with an assessment, but by having AI ask candidate a lot of questions, they can get a good sense of the skills that candidate possesses or where some of the gaps may be for particular job roles, and then serve up the cycle of training or whatever is necessary to best prepare and qualify that person for that job role. I'm also seeing some pretty interesting platforms in terms of global candidate pools. Edify is one company that's doing some pretty interesting things where, in the United States, there's a couple of industries, hospitality being one of them, healthcare and nursing, a lot of job openings, yet unfortunately, not a lot of people here in the United States that are either qualified, want to work in those positions, or are applying for those positions. And some of these technologies using VR, AR, and qualifying and training in potential candidates from alternative pools internationally and providing those opportunities, I think we're going to see a lot more of that into the future. So, the use of AI to, once again, shorten the cycle, these alternative pathways, as I mentioned earlier, boot camps, learn to earn, Those types of situations, micro credentialing and badging, as we're seeing a lot here, even in our own local area, Guido, that I know you're aware of really just shortening that cycle. Job opening, candidate, working our way backwards, as I said earlier, working our way backwards from the employer and the job opening, and then all the way backwards from the learner forward, and starting that as young as K-12. I know a lot of companies are looking at that age 16 plus now audience. They're going even younger, kind of like how these professional football teams are doing internationally of signing contracts with these 7-year-olds. I think employers are now starting to wake up to the fact of where can we get more pools of candidates so that we have a secured candidate pool for our jobs into the future.
Great review of some of the very innovative platforms and what you did with the Salvation Army. And we will definitely invite you back. Thank you for sharing your extensive expertise with us. I learned a great deal today, so I'm sure our listeners will enjoy this as well. And thank you so much for your time today, Angelo.
Oh, thank you, Guido. And thank you, Dario. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate all the work that you're doing as well.
Dario, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much to both Mr. Biasi and Dr. Minaya for continuing the conversation on how scaling with regards to innovative platforms are helping in the K-12, higher ed, and corporate sectors. In our next episode, we continue the conversation with Mr. Biasi and Dr. Minaya as they touch on AI and the importance of metrics with regards to scaling. Until next time.